Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Claudie and this video is going to be a part of the CES series. CES stands for Claudie's Emotional Spectrum Chart, which is a tool I created to help explain why I believe our emotions and our thoughts are the beating hearts to every reality. This video is going to be a follow-up video. At the end of the Dave Chappelle video, I said I would explain how people can, at the time I used the word controlled by another group of people. Though with more research, I realized it was more influence, impact, and control, which are the three main ways societies are shaped and or formed. If you think about it, this is kind of how ecosystems are formed, with things interacting with other things in the form of influence, impact, and control. Influence, impact, and control are noted in the reality category, as these are the three things that actually form the reality of an individual and society. What shapes the type of impact or control over one's reality is perspective, which is right behind reality category. What forms one's perspective is one's emotional, physical, and intellectual perception. On the outskirts of Claudie's emotional spectrum chart are the societal movers. So they actually influence and impact both the individual and society. Now, if there's a group of people or a person who has influence in all these societal movers, as seen here in the emotional, physical, and intellectual categories, they can then impact and or control other bodies of people or persons. So in the emotional category, the societal movers are creativity, discovery, omission, concealment, destruction, and they in society would be seen as areas of art, entertainment, science, religion, because these areas of society tend to move people emotionally. In the physical category, it would be seen in areas of law and economics, and would be seen in societal areas like the type of government, the economic system in place, industry. In the intellectual category, this is the functional and applicable interpretation areas of society and areas of society that involve communication. This would include areas like the legal system and places where information is distributed, like the news, and educational systems would also fall into this category as well. EPP stands for Established Position of Power, and I have a definition. I'm going to pull it up on the screen and explain what I mean by established position of power. This could be a person or a body of people who can directly influence, control, and impact all or more of the individual and societal forces and movers on the very top and very bottom of Claudie's emotional spectrum chart when compared to other people or bodies of people within that environment. This includes law and economics, creativity, discovery, omission, concealment, destruction, communication, and functional and applicable interpretation. What separates an EPP from an influencer is the EPP's impactful trilateral level of influence held within the three main categories: emotional, physical, and intellectual, which directly impacts and or controls that society's reality. I also use the term influencer. Influencer is a person, place, or thing that has the ability to stimulate or generate either positive, negative, or balanced emotional transfer. So stimulate is for the individual and generate is for the body of people. So here I have the definition for a positive influencer. A positive influencer is a person, place, or thing that has the ability to stimulate, which would apply to the individual, and or generate, which would apply to a body of people. Positive emotional energy with positive emotional transfer and positive and or balanced forces and movers. The definition of a negative influencer is a person, place, or thing that has the ability to stimulate, which applies to the individual, and or generate, applies to a body of people. Negative emotional energy with negative emotional transfer with negative and or balanced forces and movers. Now, if I haven't said it before, the positive emotional range for a society and individual is in the lavender, and the negative emotional range for a society and individual is in the red on the bottom. So I have a lot of definitions here, and there's a total of 6 theories that are very specific to relationship dynamics in where one group of people or one person is in comparison to another one, and the relationship dynamic between the two. Whoever has the largest level of influence as opposed to the person or body of people who don't have that influence. The first series that are labeled number 1 are theories of dominance. So that's keeping someone in the red emotional emotional range. And the theories that are number 2 are theories of ascension or elevation of another group of people by using the positive emotional energy noted in the lavender. So with that, here is Claudia's emotional spectrum chart theory 1A, represented as negative impact and negative control on Claudia's emotional spectrum chart. When a negative established position of power, EPP, or a negative influencer recognizes another person or a body of people in a negative emotional range and reinforce the negative emotional range with negative emotional transfer, using negative forces and movers to yield negative probable forces over that person or body of people. This is done for the benefit of the EPP or influencer. So this is done for dominance. So on Claudia's emotional spectrum chart, body of people, the EPP, and I told you EPP is someone who has influence in all those 3 areas: emotional, physical, and intellectual. And if they have better innovation than another body of people, then the influence is greater. So when a negative EPP, negative being that they have negative intentions and they want dominance, when they see another body of people who aren't as innovative as they are, or aren't as intelligent as they are, or a society that isn't as developed as they are, and they want to dominate them, they keep them in that negative emotional range. In the emotional category, that would be from acceptance to pain. In the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, depending on the type of dominance, it would be from safety and security to the physiological subsection. And in the intellectual category, it would be the non-facts and miseducation, the lies, encouraging the lack of curiosity, which also can be done by distracting someone. And it leads to them being more vulnerable to manipulation. So if another body of people can keep someone else or another body of people within that red emotional range, then they can establish dominance over them. So what will determine if the impact and or control is positive or negative, which is noted here in the reality category, will be determined by the EPP's intention and coherent actions, whether that be one of dominance encouraging dependency or one of liberation encouraging autonomy. So if a body of people are operating mentally within the lavender areas of Claudia's emotional spectrum charts in relation to their society, with the Western civilization being represented by Maslow's hierarchy of needs, noted here in the yellow in the physical section. So the results, aka probable forces, would more than likely also result or be located in the lavender. Again, the lavender represents positive societal and individual emotional energy. Now, the same would be true if a group of people were mentally in the red areas of Claudia's emotional spectrum chart in relation to their society, which would then result in the probable forces seen in red. In part, this is where I initially noticed the relationship dynamic that began my creating Claudia's emotional spectrum chart. This is because I was researching the history of slavery, and more specifically, American slavery, and learning the different perspectives of those times. So let's go through some quotes and interpret them with Claudia's emotional spectrum chart. For most of its long history, which includes most of the history of the human race, slavery was largely not the enslavement of different people, for the simple reason that only in recent centuries has either the technology or the wealth existed to go to another continent to get slaves and transport them en masse across an ocean. People were enslaved because they were vulnerable, not because of how they looked. The people of the Balkans were enslaved by fellow Europeans, as well as by the people of the Middle East for at least 6 centuries before the first African was brought to the Western Hemisphere. Before the modern era, by and large, Europeans enslaved other Europeans, Asians enslaved other Asians, Africans enslaved other Africans, and the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere enslaved other indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Slavery was not based on race, much less theories about race. I got this from Dr. Thomas Sowell, and this is in his book, Black Rednecks and White Liberals. So if you guys are looking for that, this is what the book cover looks like, and this is the author here. He is a brilliant man. I do recommend his books. They have helped a lot with the creation of my chart. So my interpretation of this is that slavery was the norm before the modern era. And by modern era, I mean like 250 plus years. So not really modern, but in the grand scheme of things. So Thomas Sowell talks about technology, and on Claudi's emotional spectrum chart, this is actually represented by innovation, which is noted in the perspective category. So innovation in itself can be either positive or negative or balanced, but this is all dependent upon what the innovation is used for. So in the case of boats and weapons at the time, both of which are just things, they were used for the implementation of Claudi's emotional spectrum chart theory 1A, which is a negative established position of power trying to establish dominance over another, essentially. But here is the theory in relation to the chart. When an established position of power, EPP or influencer, recognizes another body of people in a negative emotional range, and that's in the emotional, physical, and intellectual categories, and reinforces the negative emotional range with negative forces, movers, to yield negative probable forces over that person or body of people. And again, this is done for the benefit of the EPP or influencer. So if the intention is to physically control another body of people, then the negative forces in the physical category would be used, along with the negative physical movers, all of which are seen in the red. So through my research, what's noted in or encapsulated in the red are things that have been done to maintain dominance over other people. So that's why they're encapsulated in the red. So this would result in negative probable forces, also encapsulated in the red. So the negative innovation would qualify as a negative innovation because of how it was actually used, which is negative control. Let's just go over what control means in regards to Claudi's emotional spectrum chart. The protection and preservation of the positive and or negative forces, movers, and probable forces on Claudi's emotional spectrum chart, with the positive emotional energy being represented as the opportunity that encourages/promotes autonomy towards the forces in the physical perception category, with the intention of liberation, or the negative emotional energy being represented as the lack of opportunity that encourages/promotes dependency towards the forces in the physical perception category, with the intention of dominance. So like I said before, it's the physical, emotional, and intellectual categories that form perspective, which then go ahead to form the reality. So as you'll notice, innovation is in the perspective category, and this is because it typically requires the societal movers of the emotional, intellectual, and physical categories for the innovation to actually take form. So if a body of people are already in the red on Claudi's emotional spectrum chart, this leaves them vulnerable. So as Thomas Sowell said, it is the vulnerability of these people that permitted their enslavement, with another group using their technology and wealth to continue the cultural norms of the time, slavery, which was then a reality of that time, a reality that was incentivized by law and economics. Now, this is not to say that superior technology will always overpower another, just that it permits it. When I heard the Dave Chappelle joke at the time, I noticed that it was a similar dynamic, but it was on an individual level. Like, it wasn't a body of people, it was done on an individual, which actually kind of made it easier for me to map out how I believe influence can impact and or control individuals. So if it can impact and control individuals, it could in turn also impact and control bodies of people, thus making it able to move societies, because societies begin with the individual and every individual is moved by influence. Then the question becomes, how does that EPP or influencer maintain that level of influence, or how do they maintain that level of impact and control, along with maintaining that position of influence? While I was reading a book called A Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin, I found this quote from Frederick Douglass, and it just showed me that this was known for a while. I now understood what had been to me a most perplexing difficulty, to wit, the white man's power to enslave the black man. It was a grand achievement, and I prized it highly. From that moment, I understood the pathway from slavery to freedom. And that was by Frederick Douglass. So my interpretation of this is that besides the laws that incentivized the economic institution of slavery, it was the forces and movers of the intellectual category that truly enslaved the minds of man. It's the intellectual category that determines if a person or a body of people are on the evolving or regressing end of Claudia's emotional spectrum chart, aka society. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, please leave them down in the description box below. I would love to hear your thoughts. I appreciate the support, and remember, mind your emotions.